All right, what's going on, everyone? Sayer, Payne, and I are joined today on War Stories by a full crew. We've got 5 more people on for a crew of 7. That's more than we've ever done, but it's for a good purpose. Today, we're going to talk about remembering Dimitri Del Castillo, who was a West Point classmate, U.S. Army officer, and to the 5 gentlemen joining Sayer and I tonight, a teammate and friend. So I want to say thank you guys all so much for taking the time. We've been trying to coordinate this for a little while, and it's tough getting 3 schedules together. 4 is really challenging. 7 was impressive, but you made it happen. And before we get going, just wanted to see if we can go around the horn real quick. I'll start with Andy Brigman, if you guys don't mind, just a quick couple words about yourself, maybe your connection with Dell, and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, Roger. Hey, everybody. Andy Brigman. I was a classmate of Dell's. Played on the rugby team together. I met him junior year, cow year, on the rugby team. So active duty Army officer, one of the few that's still in. But yeah, you ever remember Dell?
Jericho.
Yeah, Jericho Jones here, classmate of Dell's. We met plebe year from the rugby team. You'll probably get that a lot on this call. Was in the Army for 8 years, got out 5 years ago. Now I'm in Seattle, Washington, in the construction industry.
Mike.
Hey guys, hey everyone. Mike here. So classmate of Dell's, company mate as well. So we first were introduced to each other during our beast or our basic training. Rugby teammate, roommate. Even after graduation, up until we parted ways, went to our respective duty stations. So close friend, dear friend of mine, and I'm really looking forward to this podcast.
Tommy.
Hey, Preston, Sarah, thanks for having me and everybody here. This is Tommy Sandinato. I joined the rugby team my sophomore year, and that's where I first met Dell. We did go through Ranger School together part of the way. We weren't in the same platoon or whatever, but that was probably the last time I would have seen him. I'm just really excited to be here and fortunate. Thanks.
Wags.
John Wagner, also played rugby with Dell. And similar to Tommy, I remember seeing him at Ranger School, and that was probably the last time I saw him.
So the other 2 here, Sayer and myself, and I, while being a classmate of Dell's, I was not on the rugby team, but I was in the company and roommates with John Wagner. So for better or for worse, ended up meeting a lot of the guys that are on this call, and ended up crossing paths with Dell a few times. Wasn't fortunate enough to call him a close friend. We didn't have that many interactions, which is why we thought it'd be great to get his crew on here and talk about it a little bit. Mike, did that mean you went through Beast with Dell? If you guys are in the same company, same roommates, or as roommates?
Yeah, so full transparency, this call could be 12, 15 people, to be honest. So we went through Beast together. Obviously just, coincidence there. But there's, a handful of other guys just as close, as everyone on this call to Dell that, I was company mates with and I still keep in touch with. Dell and I went through Beast together. When we first linked up, very close. We kind of established our little clique within the company. And then freshman year, I played football, recognized it was a big mistake. And Dell was really the driving factor to kind of recruit me. Like, hey, you played hockey, football, soccer. Like, why don't you look at, coming out to the rugby team? So that's when, going into that sophomore year, I made the smartest decision probably of my cadet career and went over to the rugby team. And that's when, Tommy and I were joined up sophomore year and, linked up with these other 3 gentlemen. So, yeah, and then, just got fast forward over. But yeah, Dell and I stayed very close, and we were up till roommates in Ranger School, and then that was the last time, post Ranger School when we said we're in separate ways in respective duty stations, and before our respective deployments. So
Yeah, Mike, you made a good point. When we were texting or emailing about who's going to be on the call, the list was getting really long. Oh, yeah. And 7 is going to be a lot. So we had to cap it at some point, but there were a lot more names being thrown out there. And to your point, Mike, I think a lot more that, 100%, at least another dozen that could be here talking. It does seem like, just from the outside looking in, that I had in my mind that all you guys are on the rugby team because it's like such a tight knit group. I just had in my mind you were all together for 4 years. I didn't realize until just now it was all different years.
Oh yeah. I guess maybe I'll start, Wags, and then you can jump in, because I guess you could tell the story about like the Army Rugby Brotherhood. We're all pretty tight, but it's interesting because our class, we all graduated in 2009, and it's kind of a wide spread of dudes that were involved in the team that were our classmates. So I guess going to like freshman year to tell the story of kind of the rugby team and how some of that evolved, like, you know, there were probably like 20 people from our class that made the team freshman year. And it's kind of like that quote, right? It's like, we lost a lot of good men out there, not playing for the Yankees, but just like through West Point attrition, right? So like, you know, our team size kind of grew and expanded and shrunk a lot going through the years. So like Wags and I were on freshman year for the rugby team. So was Dell. And then people kind of joined the team, left the team. So it's kind of a dynamic environment, which I think makes it awesome because there were so many people involved and like a lot of connections that were made, like different people groups. I mean, that's kind of how we met too, Preston, through John, but telling that dynamic, it's still the same brotherhood. It's just not everybody made it through all 4 years. I think there was actually only 3 of us who made it all 4 years. So like me and Wags, and then Zach Savory, who's not on the call tonight, but it's kind of a interesting dynamic for the group to know of, you know, it's a brotherhood. We all played rugby. We're all teammates. We're all brothers forever, but it was dynamic just because of the pressures of West Point, right?
And Dell didn't actually finish on the team. He actually,
Yeah.
he took a semester off to Spain, and then he kind of decided while he was out there, and Tommy can speak to that better, but when he came back, he didn't join the team again. But he had been on the team for a long time, and yeah, that's why he's still considered, you know, part of the team, and they have a great picture, and he's well memorialized at the rugby stadium for that reason.
For sure.
Well, I'm going to jump in there. So, you know, who knows who's going to see this podcast, but we'll be very frank. Like, first and foremost, I think we all agree, like, Army Rugby, that program is one of the top in the country and has been for years. With that comes significant amount of pressure, and there was a lot of pressure by, you know, our head coach and everyone there, because it was a top class program. So for everyone who's, you know, will eventually listen to this podcast, you know, Dell's our starter. He's our fly half, which, you know, for everyone who doesn't know rugby, that's your quarterback, right? Junior year, last game against your rivalry, you know, he gets pulled. Now, is the guy do a great job? We ended up losing the game, but his replacement do a great job? Yeah. But Dimitri definitely had, you know, a moment of, hey, I have this opportunity to go travel abroad for a semester, and do I really, you know, do I want to just lose my job? No real rationale, like the week of the, you know, biggest game of the season, and then come back and just kind of be a backup. That was a tough pill for him to swallow, and I don't think that's a ding on him, but yeah, like I know that'd be difficult to deal with, and he did. So he, you know, took that once he lost that job for zone, the coach just went with his gut instinct for, you know, a young freshman. Turned out to be a great call, but yeah, so I don't blame Dell, but you know, like John said, he's got a great memorial there at the stadium and at the complex, and yeah, I think he's just as much as obviously brothers, you know, any of the guys that went through all 4 years.
Yeah. The one thing that stands out, because that's 100% true of what you just said. But before he left, the one thing that always spoke to me about his character, dude, I remember that freaking Army Navy week, and he knew whatever that Monday or whatever day of the week that Beav was going to be starting. He was out there after practice still running drills with Beaver like that whole time for hours. Like that whole week he was out there doing that. And I'm just like watching that, like, dang, man. Like that I mean, and then to kind of tie that into what Jericho was saying, like, yeah, it was a dynamic team, and you never know what athlete's gonna opt out of whatever other sport and come in and just be a superstar in rugby. Maybe not even a superstar, but just have that kind of potential. So you always had to be I guess fighting for your position, ready to leave your position, ready to bring somebody up to your new role. Which just saying that, it's like, oh yeah, that's easy. But to actually do that and see that in front of your peers and your friends and some of the people that are below you, I'm sure that was a super hard pill to swallow. But dude, that guy was, he was just an incredible dude. And that to me was kind of I don't know, if you were just to capture what his character was like, that was it. You're at, however you want to phrase it, whether it's embarrassment or shame or just super pissed off in the moment, and to take that and be like, for the benefit of the group, I'm going to be out here running drills and teaching this guy how to do it. I'm sure there was mumblings under his breath about what he was doing, but he still did it. And that kid was a phenomenal player eventually. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that was one of those moments that really stood out for me.
Well, Dell was always all about that. He was always willing to go the extra mile to teach somebody else. Like when I joined the team cow year, I know Wags hated me. Jericho wasn't my biggest fan.
You had no idea what you're doing.
No, I didn't. But Dell taught me. Like he took me aside and he taught me the game of rugby while the rest of you just threw stones and stared daggers. Right.
Hey, we were still trying to figure it out, man. 6 days a week for a full year. It takes you a year just to figure it out.
Oh yeah,
at least.
But Dell was that guy. He was always willing to teach and to help mentor, regardless of what the situation was. How can I help is always how he approached any problem. Which isn't to say that he wasn't a phenomenal athlete, because he was really good. He was a great dude. He was like a phenomenal leader. He was a great player on the pitch, but he still gave his all to help everybody else around him. That's just who Dell was.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's like part of the intro and maybe what we're getting at. Like, yeah, we're going to tell stories and we've kind of already talked about it now, but we're kind of like a snapshot in time. Like, I think Dell's impact, like just overall, is touched a lot more people. And I think what I've really thought about this whole call and the group that we have, to your point, Preston, of, a lot of people could be on this. I think this is, in a way, like a snapshot in time and to just tell more about Dell so it's out there. And I think we'll jump around. So I apologize in advance. We're a rugby team, so I'm sure we'll get some digs and some random stories that may not have fit Dell. But like at the end of the day, the point of all of this is, the Army Rugby Brotherhood that I'm sure we'll get into, it's super tight, right? We're all brothers. Like, we got several people have tattoos with it and it's kind of lived on with that legacy. But like Dell was a big part of that, whether he played for a semester, which he didn't, he played longer than that. But, it's that group and that dynamic, that close tight knitness that I think what we're trying to portray to like honor Dell on this call, which I don't know, that's kind of where my head's at with it.
Jay, you said, you kept talking about how close the Army Rugby brothers are. And like, I don't know if it's because Wags and I were company mates for so long, maybe I was kind of close to it, but I also had a roommate that was on the football team at one point, one that was on the baseball team at one point. In my mind, the rugby team was a tighter knit group. I don't know if that's just the perception I had, but why is that? Why is that crew so tightly knit? Anybody?
And hold on, let me interrupt real quick. I have a quick question because I don't know rugby either. How big is the team? Like, what are we talking about size-wise?
Oh, good
All
question.
4 classes.
And then the size of it, just for people so they know the size of a West Point class too. Just perspective-wise.
What would you guys say with all 4 classes? Maybe fluctuate up
40.
to 70?
Yeah, actually.
I think it's
actually it was 64.
Yep.
It's 64 for authorizations, but we usually had like 5 or 6 people on the fringe. Not that I was close to getting cut from authors one year, but like, I think like, I guess for perspective at West Point, there's certain authorized sport spots for a team. I think 64, probably exactly because I'm usually right, but probably around 70 would have been on the rugby team across all 4 grades.
But then, Sarah, there's 15 players on each side of the field. So in total, there's, 15 West Point rugby players against 15 slobs. I don't know, somebody else.
Navy.
Yeah.
It's usually hippie.
Say
I don't know if that's political.
for West Point in general. So we'd graduate with 1,000 to 1,100 kids. So I don't know what it is nowadays. I know they've grown West Point, but just rough estimate, maybe 4,800 or something like that for a whole school.
And then the sport thing, because again, as a non-West Pointer here, I just want to talk about the significance with West Point, because I know that sports is a part of going to the academy itself. And so, because we are on the rugby and that relationship, what's that? Because I know, don't you guys have to do boxing? And then what does that look like? Because you have to follow it up with certain sporting activities, don't you?
Yeah, so
Got
there's
it.
you have your core squad, your club squads, then you have your intramurals. But no matter where you fall in that, every cadet's supposed to do something physical every day on like some sort of team level, which is actually a pretty awesome question, because I think and Jericho and Wags would do much better service to it. I think there's a lot to be said about the team in general, just because of the timeline from 2005 or 6 to 2009, and seeing where that, at how bare minimum it started, all the way up to what we saw as firsties or seniors. And then we were also very close with the class of 2010, and knowing what they had afterwards and what that legacy kind of had. But when Jericho and Wag started, I mean, I think you guys were like, weren't you playing like at the, like you didn't even have to go down the hill anywhere. It was
Go
like
up the hill,
that
right?
one field. Yeah.
Yeah, it changed a lot over that same course of time. But the question was more, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You go ahead, Jared.
Well, hey, Preston, so I'll jump in, man, because
The benefit of having 7 people here, Wags. You just hand it off.
so talking about why the rugby community feels though it's significantly close, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to dive into the book or anything like that, but Sebastian Younger is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote a book called Tribe. Highly recommend for anyone that's actually listening to this podcast. But we all have a desire, like innate desire, to be part of some tight knit group that that shares common objective, common goals. Like we're talking about small group dynamics here, but like high performing teams, like characteristics. The rugby team, obviously biased opinion, but went through, I think, when you're looking at things you learn 2 ways: significant emotional trauma or repetition. Rugby team, you experience like repetition, talk about 10,000 repetitions of shooting, 10,000 repetitions of something else, 10,000 repetitions of lifting a complex or Olympic weight, right, to become an expert. Rugby team, unlike even the other teams there, like we had 2 seasons. Generally, we were playing from August through May minus January was like our lifting period. So you're going to have the repetitions because it took us a year. Like if you were a wrestler, if you were a soccer player, football player, like we took you in, give us a year, we'll make you a rugby player. Also that significant emotional trauma. Like this is combat, this is competition, high level competition, combat sport, where we're playing 6 days a week, especially us the younger guys. Like we were, until we were starters junior year, senior year. Like you're playing your backup for the A side, the starters, and then you're also, for people who are not familiar with rugby, there was a B side game, or even C and D, your second, third, fourth stringers. So you're playing that 5, 6, 7 days a week. So you're getting that experience, but you're also there's some significant emotional trauma, and you're so invested in that. And then you have guys that, hey, there's similar characteristics, everyone's got different personalities, but you have that common objective, shared vision, shared consciousness. Like, we want to get this. And by the way, not a dig on the football team, but we were fucking good. We were damn good.
Pretty good.
And when you're part of a team that has a shared vision, shared objective, shared goals, right? Truly selfless in nature. And that's kind of nature of the sport itself. But lay that over with just kind of what West Point ingrains in you, about just being a good cadet and good Army officer. Like throw that into a blender, and then you're like, what do you have? You have the Army rugby team. There's a reason why, so many graduates went on to be, mostly combat arms in a time when we're at war and there's a surge, and you recognize what you're going to, because you want to, be part of a high performance team with people who have similar, characteristics and similar vision goals. And you want to test, honestly, like you want to test your mettle. Is bad, if we want to boil it down, war, on the pitch, like you want to be around those people who share those the same goals and kind of the same, shared consciousness. And, for me, like, that's why I look back at the rugby team as the best thing that ever happened to me. And the reason why I stayed in school was because of the team and the boys here and the boys out there who are obviously not on the call. But yeah, I would put the team and that culture up against anyone, West Point in the country, whatever. So proud until my last breath to be part of the Army Rugby Brotherhood.
Sure. Nailed it, Mike. That's probably an in-depth answer, but I think the hardship thing was the big piece that I think you hit on, Tommy, and then like Mike, you hit on it. But it's, I think people are probably as familiar with West Point now from some of your series that you've done, Preston. So you have all those requirements, and then just the grind of rugby. Like it was true, 2 seasons all year round. Mike says 6 days, but I mean, it was 7 days, right? Like we had games on Saturday, we had games on Sunday. You had 5 days of practice. We didn't really get days off. You have this full West Point schedule, until 4 o'clock, and then you're like running down. It was like 2 miles. We make light of it, but you had to like run down to practice until we got trucks and a bus one day. We did get a bus one day, which was cool.
Senior year.
Yeah, senior year. But you're running down there and you're grinding for like 2.5 hours for practice. And the only cutoff that we really had was like we had to make it back to school by 7, which meant like showering, changing, getting in a uniform to like eat dinner, or you didn't get like dinner, right? And like it's that bond, and then you go from that, you're doing schoolwork all night, everybody's doing that, and then you spend the whole weekend together, like just all the time, like you're eating breakfast, you're sleeping in the same room. And so that close-knit tightness, I think, is like another level of that. And I got to hit on Mike. I mean, Mike presented all the right stuff and said the right things, but also like you were with like the people you wanted to be with. Like if you were on that team, whether it was personality aside, like, I mean, the top of the top, right? Like good dudes, cool dudes, played sports, wanted to win, driven. I mean, I think that's why you see a lot of success from people who came from that program, and why we are still tight knit no matter how long you played, right? It's just that dynamic. I feel like
It made West Point more challenging, which is already challenging enough. And it being on a team makes it more challenging. Being on the rugby team, in my opinion, makes it, additionally challenging because there was no off season and it was an additional time commitment. We didn't have any benefits from being on the team. It was just like another thing to do. So we all made a personal sacrifice being on the team, and that's probably why we were so close.
So with Del deciding to leave senior year, you guys took a very professional route there, saying it was a good choice. It was the right choice by him. Can't deny it.
We totally understood.
Yeah, but I have a hard time believing
dude,
that you didn't sit him down and like twist his arm
No.
midway Sunday.
That's the other thing that's interesting about it is like,
Yeah.
I think because it is what everybody just said, like, and given his circumstances, I think everybody was just like, yeah, okay, man. Like, I get it. Like, I think you could get, I mean, as great as it was, and I'm not going to knock it at all because it, it molded me into who I am, which I think is pretty good. But not to knock it at all, but yeah, there's often times where I was going back to practice and I'd be like, man, that'd be cool if I was on the freaking intramural, whatever that sport is, where they're throwing a ball into the box, like the big tall thing. I'm like, that'd be sick. Because they're just done at 5, and then they like, so like, I think you do have like a level of burnout, and it's, I mean, I'm sure there was people that quit that I didn't think that of, where I'm just like, whatever. But like for him, I was like, yeah, dude, I get it. Like you literally broke yourself trying to do this, and it just gets to a point where it's like, yeah, it is. And then, I know there's personality conflicts that can exist between, various levels of the team and other people, and that it just adds to it. And it's just like, yeah, I don't think there was any animosity at all. I mean, I was a semester abroad with them. I was in France, he was in Spain, and I mean, we definitely had that conversation when we linked up for a weekend or whatever, and it was just, you see the other side of things, and you're like, why would I do that again? But we both made our decisions, and I think his was right, and I think mine was right for each individual purpose or person.
The burnout thing was real. right?
It is, dude.
Senior year, we had a spring break. We had a
Yeah.
spring break, and P didn't want that.
We had to fight for that spring break.
We had to fight for
That's
that because
because-
we're like, dude. And you, Tommy, remember at the end of fall season, I was like, promise me we'll get to the Final Four. I should have said, promise me we'll win a national championship.
Right.
We got to the Final Four. We lost in the Final Four. But yeah, like we needed that collectively. We needed that spring break. Like we were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. Preston, for you, it's not like a gang, like blood out, right? But it's like the commitment you showed while there, as well as the rationale and reasoning. Like if you decided to leave, some dudes had solid, like Diakabana, if you guys remember D, like I ran into him.
Yeah.
He's an SF guy. D left to do a train-up for a semester, go to military school. That was his goal, right? But he's like third string or second string. No one faults him. Dell got kind of screwed over, right? Even though Beeve was great, but the way in which coach kind of approached that was kind of, not great. And Dell's like, hey man, like I have this other opportunity and I'll kind of think about it, but do I just want to break my back when, let's be honest, the class behind us was also full of studs, right? Dell's like, do I just want to be a second or, let's be honest, even a third string? Some of these guys nipping at heels. Dell's able to enjoy senior year and enjoy with his, then girlfriend, eventually wife, dear friend of mine, Katie. So he priorities, right? But he's always part of the brotherhood, and because I think it comes down to commitment while there, and like in those characteristics, right? He wasn't a bad person. He's a great dude, and was fully committed to the team until like kind of not the team, but the coach was like, yeah, man, I got, we're breaking up. I got the next girl in line. And he's like, all right, hey, thanks, man. I blood, sweat, and tears and body. I think we're all broken to a certain degree of body, for 3 years. And then he's just like, all right, like I'm gonna try and enjoy myself for a year before I do this army thing. Because we all knew, and all of us here, we all went to war, we all went to all deployed. And I think Dell had that in mind too. He's like, I'm gonna actually enjoy my last year. So Preston, to your point, like that's why I don't think anyone batted an eye. We wanted him, but we're like, hey man, like do your thing. And for me, I saw him every fucking day. He's my boy, and we lived, a couple rooms down from each other, and ended up being roommates also after graduated. So yeah, no qualms or issues there.
So senior year is the actual, if there is a time to kind of relax, and I shouldn't say relax, but maybe enjoy some of your time at West Point. Were you guys all still hanging out? Was Dell still part of the team when you guys are going out and all that stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Couldn't get rid of us. I mean, we're pretty cool. I mean, I'm assuming at some point, I don't know how the evolution goes, but I mean, we always had cravings. That was
So I was going to ask, what were the name of those bars?
Yeah. What was
Oh,
that?
man.
What
The
was the
Cravings.
Halloween party? Was that senior year?
That was yeah.
Yeah.
that
No,
was
no,
Cravings.
I think we did it junior and senior year, or was it just one?
That was both.
We definitely
Uh-oh.
did senior year because they had the
Yeah.
volleyball pit in the back.
Mhm.
People on the team were serving drinks at the bar. Girlfriends
Yeah.
and acquaintances were also serving drinks from behind the bar.
Jake Jones he was like tried punching. I just remember like I looked over at one point and he's just bleeding from his hand down. And he's just like laughing hysterically because Texas Tech was playing and he just kept yelling, F Colt McCoy. He's just so mad. I was like, oh my gosh.
Sayer, one of the
so-
keys to finding a good bar around West Point is not that it's a good bar, but that nobody's going to it. So when you get there, you don't bump into cadets. So I don't remember. I feel like Jericho was the one that introduced me to Cravings at some point. Like it's just off the grid.
like
They're
third
they're
grade,
weird
right?
This
places.
topic
Weird
came up
places.
organically. It was on my notes. I have it actually underlined of like, hey, we should probably talk about Cravings, but no, I mean, and a lot of this is actually, I'm gonna let Wags tell the story because Wags is also the originator of Cravings. I just loud like on this podcast, but I'll let Wags say how we found it because we talked about it, I think like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, we were just driving around looking for somewhere to hang out, and we saw a sign like way in the distance, and we thought, maybe that's a place we could go to. And we get there and we're hungry, and they have like really good food, and there's no one there. It's just an empty bar in the middle of nowhere. And we're looking around, and it's a great setup. And we decided like we're gonna keep going here. We're gonna make this our bar. So we did. I think you were there too, Brigman, and
Yep.
and we just kept bringing more and more people, and then it became like the rugby party bar, and we used it literally until it shut down because it wasn't run very well, and we had enormous parties there, and that was like their biggest income of the year, and then they
I
shut
think-
down a couple years later.
I think we
Mm.
kept that place in business because that first day we went there, like we walked in and we're just dumbfounded. Like, this place is cool. It's got a volleyball court. It's got a fire pit. It's got a huge
Yeah.
bar. And I
A
remember
dog?
walking up. Yeah, I remember walking up and be like, "Hey, do you guys serve pitchers of beer?" And they're like, I mean, yeah. Let me go look in the back." And like opens like
You
the
guys dust them
closet.
off.
Yeah, he had to pull out a pitcher and like
Mm.
rinse it out, and he fills up a pitcher of beer. I was like, "Cool. Can I get 4 more of those?" And they were just dumbfounded, like, "What's going on here?" So yeah, I think we kept that place in business. Period.
Yeah.
Also, that initial thing was probably like on a Saturday afternoon at like 3, right?
Yeah.
So like, it was probably just shocking. But it's like, I mean, I guess for the uneducated
Jared,
West
Jericho
Point
freezes
there,
right
I
when
mean,
you
you want to
say-
find a place where you can hang out. You
There we
do
go.
want to avoid cadet. I'm good. No, Cravings was amazing, and I think to that point, the party. I mean, Dell was there, right? And Katie was
Mhm.
there.
Dude, he was
and it was
Obi-Wan
like-
Kenobi, and she was like Princess Leia. So I just remember she was like the only girl there, and everybody's like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "Oh God!" I was like,
He's taken.
yeah,
He's
right.
taken.
Obviously, it's like, but it was cool though because like that's the group though. Like you could do that, and nobody's gonna be like, "Oh, what's like, hey, what's up, Katie?" You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
nobody's gonna do that when you're there. It's like, okay, like cool, and it was just funny though because I just distinctly remember that because I was just thinking, what was he? I was like, what was his costume? And yeah, I remember they were like the Star Wars
Mhm.
theme.
West Point recruiting mission here. It's a bar in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of guys. So well done.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was
Otherwise
awesome.
known as a sausage fest.
Right.
No, senior year wasn't as bad at all. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
I remember a lot of guys brought the girls, especially 2010. They brought a
Maybe
lot
that's
of
what I
girls.
was then. Maybe I was just always lonely, and I just noticed. everybody else.
No, there's plenty of dudes. There's plenty of dudes. And I mean, any bar we went to, and I'm thinking like Penn State senior year as well. Like I remember in their St. Patty's Day weekend, which was the weekend before, like we rolled the team through that town. Like we'd show up and just be like 40, because we juniors and seniors, be like 40 people like entering a bar, 40 dudes. And
We
yeah,
rolled
it
hard.
was- rolled
That's-
hard.
That's how tight we
great.
were. I mean, we
Yeah.
just, like, I guess if you're going, all 40 of us should go. Fine. Like, it'll be good. There'll be lots of girls there. And it's like, we can't even fit anywhere. And we're just like huddled together. But I mean, I think it expands on like, the whole brotherhood thing. It's like, oh, you're going to go to the bar. We're all going to go together. Because we were big. The other point is we didn't want to get in trouble. Because like, we only drank at certain times. We obviously had to win. We had to have an opportunity. But like, there were times like even the team, to the point of Mike, like being competitive, that we were like dry, like, or we were supposed to be dry. Some people, I mean,
Yeah, second semester senior year. Yeah.
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 God, Craving. What a
So-
Wanted a chance at the championship, and we at least sniffed it, man. Final four. So not many people can say that.
So senior year is also when you choose branch and post at West Point. Were you guys tied in with Dell at all during that process, talking through it, deciding branch together, post together, anything like that?
And I know I've talked a lot, I apologize, but I know I was, just because Dell was in my company, right?
Yeah.
So a couple things. I know E4, we had the most infantry officers of any
Really?
company in the Corps. And that was singular reason was our mentor, which is then Lieutenant Colonel John Bryan, who is a former enlisted like Ranger Regiment, Ranger Bat Boy, close friends with Colonel Steele, or Adventure Colonel Steele. But he was there during the invasion as an officer, and he laid a significant impact on us, to include me. And I remember him saying, like, because I had ADSO, and he was saying, hey, like, Mike, you don't practice to say the practicing, like you practice to play the game. And by that he meant like, hey, I can go in this branch for 5 years, or I can give 8 years and go infantry. And remember, it was me, it was Dimitri Del Castillo, Dave Frost, Brian Walsh, and a myriad of others. And we all went infantry. But that was E4 culture, but that was also like very heavily in the Army rugby culture, which was, 80%, 90% of the graduates were always going to go combat arms. But yeah, I'll kind of stop there, but there's other talking points eventually, like once we got branch and then post and kind of how things ended up, with Dell being in Afghanistan, with that respective unit at that time and that place. It's kind of weird, kind of butterfly effect ish. Because honestly, starting from branch night, but yeah. So I was there, and I remember, just like all of us, hey, everyone gets their branches, and that was a fun night, right?
So company E4, West Point has companies and then regiments. So we throw E4 out on the show quite a bit, and it usually refers to the enlisted rank, but company E4 is what Mike's talking about. The branching thing is worth talking about for a second, because that's when cadets choose if they're going to be a pilot or an engineer, an armor officer, artillery officer, whatever it is. And it's interesting. Sayer's got some good rants on this one, but it's competitive to get infantry. Like you've got to rank high in the class to go infantry, which I think is the opposite of what most people might think. I think the perception, Sayer, we were just talking about this the other day, right? Perception.
I showed up as a freshman before, like interviewing for Ohio State as a high school guy. I was like, because they said you have to rank your job. You don't get to pick it. The Army will pick it for you. And I was like, yeah, but I want infantry, right? That's what stupid people want. But that's what I want to do. It's got to be easy, right? And they were like, no, that's not the case. You're going to have to be very strategic if you want something like that with your GPA. And, they start going down all those, ROTC has its ranking requirements, as does West Point. But I do remember being some 18-year-old know nothing, just had this general baseline assumption that dumb people want infantry, even though that's all I wanted.
It's the same at West Point, to make it feel any better. I mean, but not with dumb people. It's like super competitive to get combat arms. And it's funny that you said that, Mike, like the guys you listed from your company conveniently all played rugby too. And it wasn't just combat arms, right? Like the rugby team's kind of known for it. Maybe it's branched out some. I'm not making fun of you, Greg, but or myself, to be honest, but infantry, I mean, it's not combat arms. 90% is infantry, like from the rugby team. And then if it's not infantry, it's probably, to be honest, it was probably a class rank issue. And then it was like FA, right? Like, because of how the system works of choosing branches. Yeah. And then, not that they're outliers, but I mean, there are outliers. I was an engineer officer. I had to actually add to be an engineer, kind of like Mike saying to be an infantryman. And then Brig, you were armor. We usually had an aviator or two. Yeah. But I mean, it wasn't just combat arms. It was like we were training and everybody wanted to get in the fight based off the time that we were at West Point, right? Like we were at war. I mean, not that we were gung-ho to go for it, especially, on why we're having this call, but it was just, that was what we were training for. That was our mentality. It was definitely the mentality on the team, but it was like, hey, people are going, send me, right? Like, if not you, then who, right? Like, I mean, I think that was like an overlying other culture fact of all the other stuff that we've talked about tonight.
Yeah. And that's what I want to qualify real quick is because the reality is exactly what you're describing with the rugby team, the type A's. These are the people that have been the team captains in their high schools, and it is wartime, and it's that attitude of go get some, and the time is running out almost. I mean, that's how I thought we felt in our cohort. And it's highly competitive. I mean, that's what I was talking about GPAs, people changing their damn major so they can get the GPA to fit this thing. You got Mike, you as well, Jericho. When they say ADSO, that's adding 3 years to what you guys had was a 5-year. So ROTC's got a 7-year, West Point guys got an 8-year commitment right now. And you're still going in kind of blind because you still never actually done the job. And, it's a significant amount of time of your life, but I was, I know plenty of guys that ADSO'd, right? I felt like lucky enough I didn't have to ADSO because I was going to, right? I didn't want to, but I understand, that mentality of what the combat arms was at that time. It was completely different, than what I actually thought. It's just, like I said, when I showed up at 18.
I don't want to cut anybody else off here, but I'm interested in that butterfly effect out of branch night thing you were starting to get at there,
Yeah.
Mike. But Andy, Tommy, Wags, do you guys have anything else on all that?
I
Interrupt.
just think it's
No,
funny
I
how
would
many
just
of us had to add so.
And Indy double ad so because
Double.
he loves that. He
Oh.
loves the
You
army.
That was the thing?
Got a
I did
19-year
not know it was
commitment
a
over
thing.
here.
Andy was
Wow.
committed from day one.
Yeah.
19. They couldn't kick me out before retirement. I got plans.
Does that square at some point, Andy, or how does
I
that?
sure hope
what's
not.
what's the math on that?
Totaling it up, yeah, no, because I Bradso for armor and grad school, and then when I went to grad school, I got to pay back 6 more years on top of that. So,
Oh, it's still on top of that.
oh yeah, no,
I thought
I'm
that
still
would-
working out. No, I'm what are we? 12 years in now? 13 years in? Yeah, 12 years in. I've still got
13.
I think I still have 6 years on my commitment.
Hey,
From
can I
West
just
Point.
say this real quick? So you guys know, and obviously we'll get back to Dell, right? Because it's going to get heavy at some point. Texas A&M Division 1, Brig went back. And he played on the A&M team.
What?
And Brig killed it.
That's impressive.
Like
Really?
he was a graduate player. He's like, hey, yeah, I played at West Point, and I'm going to show you young bucks how it's done. And Brig killed it down in A&M.
Did you get another
So-
tattoo? Did they have a tattoo that you got?
I
Okay,
did
good.
not. No, too much yeehaw for that. No, it was a good time
That's
though. It was a
awesome.
great group of dudes. It's a very different culture though. Like Texas A&M still has a very thorough military culture with the Corps cadets and everything, but it doesn't replicate like what we had at West Point by any
Mhm.
means. But it's very much a good time. It was fun to get back in the saddle and play competitively down there. So it was awesome.
That's unique. Brig. So a 27-year commitment and playing top tier rugby at multiple schools. I like it. That's
You're like a red shirt in grad school. I love it.
So
I
I
was
was the only
older than- I
person
was
who
older than
owes
Coach.
money at 20 years
Yeah.
rather than get a pension.
I was older than my coaches at A&M.
Hey, I had to give you credits, man. Yeah, kudos to you, dude.
Thanks, bro.
You're still putting it out there and playing at a high level, man. So I think we all missed the competition.
But to kind of circle it back to what you were saying, Preston, but Dell was rated like he was ranked really high in our class, right? Like, I mean,
He was
I
super
think we would be
smart.
remiss from saying like we're talking a lot of great things about Dell, like as a personality, but like Dell was kind of like, in my mind, good at everything, right? Like
Yes.
Dell was like really good at school. He was a physical stud. Like
Yep.
he was fast, athletic, good guy. Like, I mean, he was, I mean, I don't know if there's prototypes, right? But like Dell was like an amazing West Point cadet, right? Like he was kind of good at everything. So I don't think he had the ADSO conversation that some of us are having, right? Like,
no, but he worked for it. Couple things. Academically, he worked hard for it. My freshman year, I screwed off, and my GPA, my transcripts reflect that. I think I got 198 my second semester.
there we go.
But Dell
Damn, bro.
worked at it, and he put in the work and was very diligent and like excelled academically. And even rugby, I think we all can attest. And Brig, you're the only one. Wags, you are a scrum, right? You're tough as, I'm going to reduce swearing, tough as nails. But Dell had a very, in rugby terms, probably a slight, body type. Dell, I remember sophomore year. We all remember sophomore year in the 07 class. We got the crap kicked out of us, right, during practice. Those 07 guys, who some were here at my location, right, in certain organizations still, they beat the hell out of us. But Dell, soaking wet, 165 pounds. There were some kids that went through West Point, kids, got men and women, that who were like smart as hell, never had to study hard, and like everything came natural. Like Dell, things came natural to him, but he was in that zone that like he still put in the effort. And for rugby, like he would get, like all of us, but he'd get the crap kicked out of him and get back up. And for the academic portion, he put in the work, and I saw that. Like we were, right next
Got
to
it.
each other and close friends. So it's not it speaks to his character and it speaks to just the dedication to be that like the holistic cadet and eventually Army officer that like you want. Because he ultimately put in the work and was rewarded. So because I think we all know like the couple kids that were way at the top, that smart as hell, the Rhodes Scholars, Oxford Scholars, like congratulations, you're geniuses. But Dell was in that next tier that like, hey, they were good, but they worked for it and they were rewarded accordingly.
Something that I thought set him apart, even within that sort of higher echelon of cadets, was that he was humble and he was just caring, and he was, like we said earlier, he was just a really good person about it, and he had empathy, which not everyone that's that talented displays. You know, a lot of people, they get this big ego and they get this oh, I'm doing so well, I'm at this great school, I'm high ranked, I'm gonna get whatever branch I want to get. But Dell never had that. He was always willing to help, and he was always looking out for people. And to me, that kind of sets him apart.
It's kind of like that attraction, right? I don't have a book to quote or anything, but you wanted to be around somebody like Dimitri, right? Like he just had qualities and innateness. Like he was super friendly, always like welcoming, in addition to the empathy, and like you were like, Dell's awesome, and like he always treated you like that, right? No matter where you were, right? Like just that impact and like gravitas, or just he was just a good dude. Like, I mean, I think we have a saying, I think we always want to live up to it with the legacies and reputations of like rugby players, but like truly you can say it about a lot of dudes, but Dell was among the best of us, right? Like the best of us that we already thought we were kind of towards the top, but like Dell was just that kind of dude, right? Like great dude,
So I know our minds mess with this over time, but I have in my mind for Dell and actually for another one of our classmates, Darren Hidalgo, who we lost in Afghanistan. Both of them, I'll say like acquaintances, right? Like not super close friends, not in the same company. Had a couple classes with Darren, but then with Dell, it would have just been crossing paths through you guys. The image in my mind, and I don't know if this is my mind playing tricks me after the fact, is always smiling and laughing with Dell.
Yep.
Okay, that's not just me
100%.
making it up.
100%.
They're Latino heat. Seriously, I got a picture. Still, and I'll send you guys after. I got Darren's on my right, Dell's on my left, junior year. Smoking cigars that night, and they're both laughing. But you hit it on the nail on the head. They're both laughing, and one of the only like now with nowadays technology and like the proliferation of videos all the time, we just had our pictures and it was like our actual cameras, right? Our phone cameras were shit. That was one thing I actually like wish I could have, was both those guys they had such boisterous laughs.
Yeah.
Darren was built like a fire hydrant, like an all-state wrestler. And when he recycled in Florida, Darren turned into a legit fire hydrant. Dell would bend over laughing because he would laugh so hard, but they would just make everyone else erupt with laughter. And actually, and I'm sorry to turn this into this, but coincidentally, I was so both of them were with my company in Buckner sophomore year, because Darren got scrambled or whatever. Like there was a couple, how it was random scrambling. So
Yeah.
Darren was with us, and that was when Darren and I first became friends. But recently, a friend of mine who's a TAC up there is getting out of or transitioning out of the Army, asked me to write something for them because he was reading it during a remembrance, and I wrote something for Dell and Darren. So that kind of their characteristics, right? Mentioned the atypical cadets. They both had a penchant to buck various traditions and provide lighthearted viewpoints on stressful events at West Point. I think we all went through. But one thing, and legit, I'm looking at this. Why I don't know what I'm looking like right now on the screen, but I told you about Sebastian Younger earlier, and one of my favorite quotes, and I said this to my friend who read it to some cadets, was, what would you risk dying for, and for whom, is perhaps the most profound question a person can ask themselves. The vast majority of people in modern society are able to pass their whole lives without ever having to ask that or answer that question, which is both an enormous blessing and a significant loss. Yeah, I remember where I was the 2011 for February, for May for John Runkle, for Dell in June, and later for Tim. But back to like Dell and Darren, like what hit me the hardest was like they were legitimately, and this gets thrown around, and at least in my community, and too often, like good dudes, like whatever, legitimately the best of us. They generally at their heart, good people, tremendous people that made an impact on others, which is I think at the end of the day is like what we all want to be, like good husbands, good fathers, good friends, good brothers, good people, and have an impact on others. And those guys, like, yeah, got it in spades, man. And because we wouldn't be having this if and Darren, we could do another podcast, and I told you about him before. We could do another podcast about Darren, but Dell, yeah, both of them. But they were Spanish dudes who were always laughing, always boisterous, and just fucking awesome dudes. So yeah, this is good, man, that we're doing this.
Yeah. But to clarify, which I always do, sorry, awesome dudes, really nice, but also you see our mentality. You're kind of experiencing this for the first time, Sarah, but like we do have a little back and forth. Like we're a pretty tight group, no holds barred, thick skins, right? They'll could dish it out too, right? Like he would be really good, but I mean, he was just part of us. We all had that same mentality, right? Like we kept it light, and I mean, Dell was just like always there and cutting up with all of us, right? It's awesome.
It's a collective suffering, right? And it sounds like that rugby is all suffering, you know what I mean? And well, that's the emotional trauma that Mike's talking about. And I agree. I've read Tribe too. I mean, and I was a wrestler too in high school. There's something about that. There's a level of suffering there. And when you're with the dudes, and sports do that, and then military does that, right? Maybe there are other ways, I don't know, but this is the combination of both, so I would imagine that tightness is going to be a very, very strong bond. 70 people out of thousands, you're going to really identify with who you know.
We can always bounce back, but let's transition a little bit into the Army. So Dell branched infantry, post. Where was his first assignment? Or I guess, where's his assignment? I don't think I know.
In Hawaii. Well, yeah,
No.
I guess after Benning and all that, yeah.
He's smart.
So, yeah,
can
I was going to say
up there.
I'm going to provide some context that's actually key to leading up to
Fire away,
the
Mike.
butterfly
Yeah.
effect, if you don't mind. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry
do
to fucking take this
I'll
off.
do it, Mike.
No, go, Mike.
So Dell actually branched 82nd, right?
posted to brag.
Posted 82nd. Katie, his girlfriend at the time, eventual wife, posted 25th ID. Right, it's far opposite, minus him going to Germany. It's far opposite they can possibly be. And Katie and Dell started more or less dating sophomore year. Buckner, through him being semester abroad, she visited him. Like they were, like we used to call her sweet baby Katie. Like we like E4, like we like protected her, looked out for her, always took care of her, especially when he went abroad. So they're obviously posted opposite ends of the world, Hawaii and North Carolina. But Katie's dad, and I don't know all the intricacies, but Katie's dad retired 06, like pulled some strings and figured something out and got Dell posted to Hawaii. So we talk about butterfly effect is like, so Dell, myself, and Dave Frost were living together off Exit 4 in Benning. But if you guys know Exit 4 in Benning, like not a nice place. Thank you, Brick. Not a nice place.
Super classy.
Yeah.
But I forget if it was IOBC. It had to be an IOBC that we found out, like Dell found out he's not going to 82nd, he's going to 25th. And Dave didn't take it like personally or anything like that. He's like, man, like, come on, dude. Like all the best guys are going to 82nd. 82nd was going to war. But so Dell ended up going 25th and being there with Katie, and they got in the same brigade. And so same brigade, same deployment cycle. And jumping ahead, and that's when 2011 we're all collectively deployed, a lot of us at least here, and Dell's birthday is January 9th, or June 9th, and that was the last day Katie saw him because Katie flew in from another outstation and saw him. So surprised him with like a birthday cake. Because Dell and his platoon, his company, his battalion was preparation for the clearance operation in the coming weeks. And yeah, and then obviously we know Dell was tragically killed a couple weeks later. But I was talking about the butterfly effect. Like he was going somewhere else, but because obviously he's like legitimate love for Katie, and what I didn't know, what Dave didn't know, is his roommate. Our room, you know, he's one of our best friends, right? The only people that knew, they got married. They got married in secret. The only people that knew was the parents. Like, I don't think the brothers and sisters knew. Like his sister or his brother. He didn't tell us because they're very like she's very Southern Baptist. He was very Catholic. But like they wanted to have a proper ceremony and do everything right. But they also want to take care of each other. So they got married in secret. They didn't even tell us
before deployment.
And then they got married in secret and then deployed. So after Benning, after Ranger School, Dell and Tommy and I graduated together. Dell recycled.
Dude, he recycled mountains.
Mountains for knots.
Knots. Dude, I'll never forget that.
He did.
I'm like,
Mountains for knots.
I just remember like getting on the bus or whatever, and I was like, what do you mean you're not going with these? Like, I recycled knots.
He was like one of like the handful, right? That did.
Yeah, and I just started
so bad
like
for those guys.
laughing. I was like, are you serious, dude? But to go
hold on, Tommy, go back. You got to explain that for even for me. I don't really know what that means.
So, I mean, and I wasn't good at knots, but there's a graded portion in Ranger School and Mountain Phase where you get graded on having to know and practice like 6 out of 10, however many knots they tell you, then you have to do it live basically and get graded by an RI. And you know, if you do it incorrectly, you get a no-go, and then I think you could try it again or whatever. But if you don't pass it, that's criteria to not pass the phase. So you can do all the physical crap, you know, you get your goes on your, at that time, in mountains, you're a platoon leader or a platoon sergeant or squad leader either. So like any of those levels, you could get your go, and then you could recycle for knots for not knowing how to, and I'm sure it wasn't a square knot. I don't know what knot it was, but it's like, that's what it could have been. It's like, right over left. Nope, it's right over left over right. You're out of here. Like that type of thing.
In the grand scheme, one of the easiest things.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he like which is, it's just funny. Like, not that it's funny, but like we preface all this was like, yeah, he was a really smart dude. He's like really fit and everything like that. But like, that's why I was just like, knots, bro. I was like, are you serious? Not. But you know, not to paint like go to a religious side of it, but that was my last conversation with Dell as I was getting on, because I think after that you pack your bags and you take the bus to Florida. And I was thinking about this the other day. This is a side note. I remember Mike Fleming singing some song for like the 3-hour bus ride to like, he was just so happy that he passed. It was some stupid pop song that was out at the time. I really wish I could remember it. But anyways, that was the last time I talked with Dell, and it was just really, you know, after you heard the news, you know, fast forward in 2011, one of the things that I reflected on was my last conversation with him. And, you know, he did say, he's like, you know, yeah, he's like, I recycle knots. He was, you know, pretty beat up about it. But then he also said, he's like, you know, I've actually had a lot of time to like reflect. He's like, I restored a relationship with Christ. And like, you know, for me, like I am a Christian, and for me, remembering that and knowing where his mind was at the time, you know, that was big for me. And that was like pretty impactful of knowing where his mind was at that time, which I'm sure he carried, you know, because that was 2010, for the next year or some change. So that was a big thing to me. But then also to go on that butterfly effect thing too, it's amazing after the fact. Some of the kids, there's like my company mates at school, and I never knew they had any interactions with Dell, but like people in my class, or like my classmates in C3, they were like, Like, oh yeah, that dude got me through Ranger school. That was my Ranger buddy in whatever phase. I was like, dang. And then one of my really good friends from school, he was stationed in Hawaii as well. And he's like, it's just crazy because I remember, and like looking back on it, it's like you could, if you really wanted to scam the Army, like in processing, you could do it. Because like I just remember thinking like, oh, they know everything about me, where I'm going. It's like they don't know. You could go out there and just be like, I need to go here, and they're like, you got it. But he was like, when they both arrived at Hawaii, it was like you're just in a line, and one of them was like, okay, you're going to 3rd Brigade, you're going to 2nd Brigade, and it's like you switched things around. You don't recycle mountain fit, like you don't do all these things, and it's like it's just crazy to see how small little things, left or right, could have made such a different, result or whatever. But you talk about the butterfly effect, and it's insane once you start peeling back the layers and seeing how different decisions lead to different places. And yeah, I just wanted to share that because it was just, super impactful on me just when I was, finally thinking back on things and everything like that.
That the concept of a last conversation like that, it feels like, well, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, but like when I was deploying, like getting on the plane, I was thinking the last conversation with my family because it was right there. It never crossed my mind with any of my classmates, which is weird because like Brig, whenever I saw you last at graduation, we were both going to war at some point. It should be double the odds that we're not going to talk again versus just me and my family, right? So when you're talking about that, Tommy, like, I don't know, have you guys ever had that in your mind throughout your career when you're chatting with a classmate or somebody else in the military, especially at that time, everybody was deploying left and right. I guess personally, I never had in my mind, like this could be the last time Wags and I talk.
I don't think, sorry, yeah, not to cut you off. I don't think I didn't not have that thought. I definitely had that thought, but you just never think it's going to be whoever it ends up being. You know what I mean?
Like your boy.
Right. Like no matter what. And I don't want to even put myself at like the friendship level that, you had with the Mike and some other people, like even the people on the backs had more interaction with him than I did on the forwards end of it. But just, yeah, you just never think it's going to be like, oh, maybe I'll know him or maybe I won't. So when that happened, it was, that was pretty like out of the blue, even though you do in the back of your mind kind of have that thought. It's just never the person.
I mean, it never occurred to me ever. I mean, like you said, we've got 4,000 cadets. They're all going to war. I mean, the odds are just, it's going to happen. In 2011, it happened because that was a brutal year for our class. We took 4 down that year. And I guess it really wasn't until then that you started thinking back, like, Darren's a great dude. Fucking Ruggles awesome. I love Dell. When was the last time I talked to him? And it's Mike, you mentioned it before we got on here, just how communication, how social structures have changed over the years. You got to think back 2009, 10, 11, when we were there.
Phone calls and texts.
Yeah, it was flip phones. Like, Facebook was in its infancy.
Yeah.
We didn't keep contact like we did now. I mean,
and you think everybody is at the same stage of where they're at in the life. Like, we're thinking about all these things, but at the end, like at the same time, I was thinking, man, am I even going to deploy? I hope I deploy. Am I even going to do this? I still got to go do this. I got to, all these things that you're checking boxes. And then, it's just such an interesting time frame right after graduation, because you have some people that they go to IBOLC immediately. Some people take their 30 or 60 days leave. So then you start having these staggered time frames and you start seeing where people are at. So then your mind just kind of goes like, I got to catch up and blah, blah, blah. So it's easy for things to get lost of the overall thing of like, man, this is war. And like, we know that people die in it. Like we heard, even when we were cadets, we heard, the stuff at the poop deck or wherever of announcements coming over the loudspeaker. So it's easy for it to get lost, but everybody just had so much stuff going on at the time. And then, the means of communication doesn't help either.
It's kind of like that shotgun blast after graduation, right? Like, because I mean, my interactions were probably at graduation time with Dell, right? Because then once you graduate from West Point, there's leave, there's all this other crazy stuff, and then it's boom across the country. And like, I think I struggled with it a lot, which I mean, I think a lot of you guys know, like, it's just kind of hard because you get in the moment of where you are, right, with those interactions, and you're still prepping, right? Everybody's program, there's this life and death war that's coming, and then you're in it. You're finally like, you've reached like, hey, I'm in it now, and now you're in the real army, and you're prepping to do it for real. And it's like you have that in the back of your mind, but you're just so hyper focused on like doing your job and doing the right thing of where you are in that moment that it's kind of hard with the technology and everything. Like you have it in the back of your mind, you know it's going to happen, that you know you might lose friends or have this weird relationship with life and death. And I feel like maybe we were a little bit fortunate in a way because we were at wartime and everybody, you had 4 years of West Point to kind of think through some of that. But then once you actually got out there, it was just operate, right? Like it was, here's my line. I need to do the right thing for my guys, right? Yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but weird thing that my wife tells me that I have a weird relationship with life and death and risk management and like how you do things. And so you, in a way, like maybe I have a guilty conscience, like you try not to think about that, right? Because you got to focus on doing everything you can to take one step and take care of your guys, right? It's like a weird dynamic of when we graduated and the period of time it was, right?
But
Mike?
isn't that the takeaway? You know, the recognition at an earlier age that it can be your last conversation, right? You learn that the hard way,
Absolutely.
because that's everybody every day. You know, we don't know.
I mean, I don't think it was lost on us. I mean, I remember junior year, 2007, 2008. What I feel like was every other day we were standing up for a graduate that was killed, right, during the surge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then what for you, Sarah and Preston, I remember us as sophomores. Remember, so going back to just the rugby and brotherhood for the audience, the rugby team was a club team at West Point. Really didn't have much funding, didn't have a lot of recognition outside of the players that played it. We got an influx of funding because of a private donor. We got top of the class buildings, weight facilities, locker rooms, everything. So in the locker room, our sophomore year, there was in our home locker room 70 lockers, in our visiting locker rooms like 40 lockers, whatever. We put a placard that was probably, I'm looking at my hands right now, probably 3 to 4 inches by 1 inch, and every one of those like little placards we put on as sophomores over a locker was like a $20,000 or $10,000 donation, but it was all in remembrance of a rugby player or a family, in remembrance of a rugby player. And then now at the rugby for the audience, behind what we call the hill. So we have the rugby field and the rugby complex right next to the Hudson River, Sarah, for you and for the audience. Right behind the complex is like a greater than 45, probably 50 degrees straight uphill.
Oh,
And
And we used to have,
it's almost straight up.
it's probably a 60-degree hill, and it's
I
hundreds
just looking straight up. I was like, there's no way.
hundreds of meters. And we just did it a couple years ago during a 10-year reunion. But on top of that, we have and forget politics and religion, but we have a cross there with respective dog tags of all the former graduates and rugby players who've died. And every Monday, it was our conditioning day. We'd always have to run the hill at the end of practice, touch the cross, and it's a respect to remember those who went before you. And do not forget that rugby is important, is critical importance to school and what you do, but you are part of a larger community that is the army, what you're ultimately going to do. You're going to lead soldiers. You're going to go to combat because the characteristics you have innately, as well as probably those in which the formative experiences that you experience in rugby, playing on the rugby team, like you expect to take that with you and lead soldiers and be good combat leaders. And just going back to the book Tribe, by Younger, it's like you just want to be a part of that community. And it's like regardless of the politics and everything, policy level in DC, like in personal opinion aside, like you wanted to lead dudes in combat. You wanted to be of value. You wanted to matter. And once we went our separate ways, it was like, yeah, we were hyper focused on our job because I think we recognized, and to be honest, the person who's most silent here is Wags, probably the most probably difficult deployment, but you probably had like, you recognize the responsibility, the weight of that responsibility that was before you. And everyone had their own individual experiences, and we all have our goods and bads, because I think everyone had their individual experiences and some traumatic. But yeah, I mean, we're here kind of talk about those experiences, but also Del within that, because Del's a platoon leader, and he was the main effort as a platoon leader for his company, who's the main effort for his battalion, who's the main effort for the brigade to clear a hostile area, because that is what U.S. Army wanted to do in Afghanistan. And you only put your best there, right? So,
Mike, you're talking about the personal experiences there, and one that I actually didn't know this part of the story until Wags told me just a few months ago. But I think we moved through it quickly because you guys have heard this story enough. But Katie was right there, downrange with Del. That's not an experience family members get. Usually it's a knock at the door, or God forbid, news. You read an article online or something, right? There were some leaks where things like that happened, but that's hard to imagine, being downrange and whatever you see a casualty report or hear a radio call when your loved one is out there.
Yeah, I was in Iraq getting ready for a mission actually, and I got a not a Zoom, Skype. I got a Skype message from one of the pilots, one of the Kiowa pilots, who's a classmate, who's an 08 graduate. I'm not gonna say his name because he released it earlier. He's like, dude, like Del's KIA. And I'm in Iraq, right? I'm doing my own thing, and I'm just like getting ready to go out on mission. And I was blown away. He said he went back to refuel. He was overhead. He knew Del was on ground. He heard the call. Put two and two together. It was like, dude, Del's dead. And then for Katie's recounted that she's got a decent social media following. Katie's since remarried and has 3 beautiful children. And so I remember Katie reaching out to me asking if it was okay to date again. And I was like, absolutely, because Del would not want you to just not date, for a long time after. And but Del was Katie was in country, and Katie will recount this, and she's done it over social media. She's like, hey, every anniversary of his death, she was in a chew, and she got knocked. Originally she was in the jock hearing the calls for that operation. I think she heard that someone was down. Medevac got sent up 9-line, and eventually she went back to her chew, and then she got a knock in the middle of the night or something like that. It was and I hope I don't screw up the details, but yeah, it was the brigade chaplain, and I think maybe the brigade commander, and immediately she just fell to her knees, right? So it was good and bad of like being in the same unit, because they were together, they're deploying at the same time, but obviously, and she saw him on his birthday, she made him a cake. That's she'll show that every year. And I do thank her husband for being her husband now, Tom, for like understanding that like that is part of Katie, and that will never go away, right? And he's accepted that, like they have a beautiful family now, but but he's accepted that Del was part of her life and always will be. So I do appreciate Tom for that. But Katie went through a lot in Del's family, and I still talk to his dad probably once, twice a year. I'm going to share this podcast with them after it's posted, because Del's a great dude, and impacted a lot of lives, and this is just a way to keep remembering. So I appreciate Preston.
Yeah, man.
Dude, just to like piggyback on that, like it's not a normal experience for a spouse or a loved one to be deployed at the same location with the same unit. So I really couldn't imagine what that would even be. I mean, having been on the other side, 1 second.
Some families happening there.
Hey, little buddy.
But you get on the other side, and having been in, my own area of operations or whatever, and hearing the battle roster numbers getting called on the 9 lines, and then you're the one that's piecing that together, like, let alone being that close to somebody. I mean, it's just yeah, she's it's like super strong woman for sure. I just couldn't imagine that, what that would have been like.
Yeah, and since we've talked about it, I mean, I think there's stuff out there. I mean, I think we all know Katie, but like Katie was amazing at West Point too, right? And it's kind of funny you talk about brotherhood and separation. We'll never admit to it because we're kind of like the men's Army rugby team, but there is a badass group of girls and women, like grown ass women, to be honest, that play rugby. The women's Army rugby team. War, declare it. I'll do that on this call. But Katie,
I love you, brother.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, like, and how it, I don't know where the line was, but Katie was a rugby player at West Point the whole time and a leader on that team. And I think, we'd be missing something if we didn't bring that up. I know we're talking a lot of rugby stuff and a lot of heavy stuff, but Katie was always around there as well and connected to the rugby team on the women's side, which is all one family. We'll never admit it. I mean, there's always like this friction, not in a weird way, just from team dynamics. But, Katie was a badass and a rugby player too. And I think part of that was the connection, but I couldn't say enough positive things about Katie while we were at school. Like I was kind of tight with her from knowing Dell and, when he did a semester abroad and having conversations with her, but she's amazing, right? Like you could see how, Dell would be attracted, but I don't know, however that works, but they were a great dynamic duo, and we're talking about a lot of the harsh things there that happened while they were in country, but Katie was amazing, and we could probably have a podcast about her of how she's, handled such a big loss like losing Dell and done it with grace and just she's just an amazing person as well, right? Like maybe greatness tracks greatness, right? And I didn't want to miss anything without saying about, we all knew Katie too, just from Dell, right? So it's all intertwined, like it's all one big family, right? And it's all tough stuff, right?
I appreciate that.
One of the challenges in those couple of years when everybody goes into the Army and goes to Iraq, Mike or Wags and I and Sarah were freshly back from Afghanistan, maybe on block leave even, right? It was right after we got back. June 25th, I believe, right? Is the date we're talking about here. And Tommy, Jericho, Andy, I'm sure you guys were scattered around the country or around the world. Was there any opportunity for friends, teammates to kind of connect online, in person, any way at all, or is that just kind of out of the cards?
I know for me, because of the timing of it all, I know there was a service at West Point after they brought his body home, and I couldn't go to the service because of our deployment schedule. I couldn't get authorized to go, and that just killed me.
You couldn't get authorized to go on that?
Big Army, man.
It was from
and when we were doing nothing.
Yeah, but it was a weird timing, and I couldn't get extra leave, and he wasn't family, so they declined it.
Despicable.
Yeah. So for me, the reason I say that is I think that would have helped because I never had like that closure, so I kind of held on to things for years. Until recently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all know the story. It's like everything that Mike hit on. It just hits you, right? Like I've talked some, and we've talked on it. Like you have this relationship with life and death that's odd, that you kind of compartmentalize and separate it, and then you hear it, and I mean, I think I found out maybe a little bit later than everybody, and I don't even know who told me, but it was just like, you're just like crushed, right? Like you don't, you have this thought that it's going to happen, but it's not going to happen to me, right? That's always that thought process with death, like with anything, right? But expanded upon exponential being from West Point and being in the Army, right? And you hear it, and I don't even know when I heard it, but I know I was like by myself, right? And somebody called me, and Wags, you might have called me, right? To tell me as it came through a given op tempo, and it hits you. And like, I'll be honest on this podcast because I think we deserve it, and there's a lot of veterans out there. There's a lot of people who listen to this, but it's hard to process something like that. And if I'm being honest, like, even though what we've been covering tonight, like, I think part of like this podcast and what we're talking about right now, like, I wouldn't have had some of the questions, and I don't know that I'm actually processing it until like right now, right? Because you get good at understanding life and death and different things, but also compartmentalizing. And so a lot of this is just like, I'm going through it right now, right? And I think a lot of veterans out there, a lot of our classmates are like, you just always think you're going to run into them at the next thing, right? Like there's always tomorrow this different setup, right? Where, hey, it happened, but hey, it's okay because it's kind of in this box. And like how you remember somebody, you remember all the positive things and all the stuff we're talking about tonight, but it is tough to process. And I don't even know what I was doing, but I don't even know if I could have like manned up and gone to the memorial, right? Like it takes a level of courage to process something like that, and it takes time, right? As much as I love Dell and everything that we're saying tonight, like it's tough, right? Like it I never wanted to hear that news. You never want to hear it about anybody, but somebody as great as Dell, somebody you were connected to, that, I mean, hell, I think I slept in beds with Dell on like rugby trips, right? Like you're so tight and you don't want that to happen, right? It's hard.
Talk about compartmentalizing it. Like, I just didn't. I didn't. I remember. So I found out. P told me, actually, Coach. I was on Facebook one night. I'd already finished my first deployment. We're ramping up for the second deployment, and I get a random message. I've obviously never talked to Coach since graduation, and his message was just, "Brig, what's your phone number?" That was it. Like, "Hey, Coach, what's up? Here's my number," and the phone rings, and he tells me. And I mean, obviously you're devastated, but you're just so shocked. It was 7 o'clock. It was probably, no, it was dark outside. It was probably, it's the middle of the summer. So it was probably 9 o'clock at night. Phone call from Coach. Dell's gone. And we talk about how, what's our relationship with life and death. Coach is very matter of fact about it. Dell's gone. I know this hurts. Where are the rest of the guys? Do you have their numbers? And going right back to that communication at the time, I was like, I know Mike's in country. The rest of the team, like, I have no idea. Like, they're in and out. I don't know where guys are right now. And it became kind of a frantic search. Like, can I track down everyone's cell numbers so that Coach can tell people so we can get the word out? But I didn't go to the memorial. I didn't do anything. I literally just boxed it and let it go. Like, I didn't deal with it. Mike, he's got his Team Dell shirt. You guys all do. Like, I did nothing. I literally just ignored it because I didn't want to deal with it. And I mean, I knew Dell. Obviously Mike knows much better. You guys played with him a lot longer than I did. Dell's a great dude. I love the guy, phenomenal man. But I couldn't deal with it, and I just kind of boxed it up, put it away, and ignored it until I had to. And unfortunately, it's not the right answer, but I think that's kind of, speaking of where you're at, Jericho. It's what I had to do to get through.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Personal
honest
answer,
though,
yeah.
and that's a real answer though. I remember I was in Italy, and we'd gotten back from deployment in the previous November, and I was only a platoon leader for barely any time, so I was still like getting to know my guys and everything. And I was in Verona, and my wife, I think we were married at the time. Yeah, we had just gotten married. Also, in secret. But she's like, your coach keeps asking for your number. She's texting me through Facebook or whatever. I was like, okay. I was like, ignore. Like, okay, I'm not gonna answer this right now. Honestly, I was, because I was like at a bar in Verona and I'm just trying to hang out. I'm like, I don't know what this conversation is gonna be about. And she's like, it's really important. He keeps asking me. I was like, okay, just give it to him. And he called, and it was very similar conversation, Brig. And I I'm not, yeah, like, stupid response. I got drunk big time. And I don't think that was a good thing, obviously, at all. I was already out there partying with some friends. And I was like, okay, like, what am I going to do really right now? I'm halfway across the world. Like, there was still like, I don't even know what our unit was doing, but it was, that 6 months after where you start doing like the individual skills or whatever. So it was probably like an EIB thing was coming up or something like that. So it was really just like dealt with it then. And I guess maybe, I don't know, I didn't like ship it away or anything like that, but that's how I handled it that night. And just looking back, I was like, man, freaking moron. Like, I can't believe that. But it's weird though, because when it hit me that I actually like got emotional about it was when I was already out of the Army. And so it was probably like 2000. I could look it up and figure out the date because it was a stupid, like, Soldier Field was hosting the draft, and it was like in Chicago. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Let's go to the draft. And it ended up being like super lame and not cool. I thought it was going to be like all the players are going to be there. It wasn't. It was just like, we're going to have a big stadium and like video it of where everybody else is. It's like, this sucks. But I just remember going to the Porta-John just to go to the restroom, and I just like broke down in there. I don't know why, like, everything just started pouring over me. I'm like, I don't know why I was thinking this. I texted Wire. I was like, did you ever just think about all the stuff that we have that he doesn't have? And like how, my son was like 2 or 3, and my youngest was like 1 or 2 at the time, depending on when this was. I was like happily married. And that's when things started processing, is like, I'm at this event, but I have the ability to go to this event. And it just kind of poured over me to where I was just thinking of like all these things in my life that I've been afforded the opportunity to have, been blessed with. And he didn't have that. It was, then you start thinking like, like of all the people to take of just like the brightest future that it could have possibly have been. And it was gone. And that was just like, I needed that. And like, I didn't feel like I was able to do that until I started talking to probably Wags. I think it was, you probably don't even remember it, but you have more impact on people than you assume. I will tell you that. He was just talking about, he's like, yeah, I had a good cry. You have to have a good cry every now and then. I was like, yeah, you do. And like, I did. I finally felt like that was like validated for me to do that. And it was kind of like, I don't know, after all that time, I'm like, wow. And, I still go back and think of things like that, or I'll get caught up in something where your mind starts going about that. But yeah, it took me a while. And like honestly, like I don't want to say like the most minimum impact was probably, but it was not the most minimum impact. But for what I'm saying, the smaller of the impacts was closer to the event than afterwards. Like afterwards of when processing it, it was kind of like, whoa, like there's so much to life that I'm experiencing. It's like, you just start thinking of, it could have been Dell, it could have been other people that you start thinking of, but for that, moment, that was where my mind went.
I feel like we've spent an hour or more talking about how awesome of a guy Dell was, and how he was so smart and athletic and a good leader and all these things. And I think when something like this happens, at least in my mind, I'm thinking about a handful of guys, it's scary in the sense that you almost think, what chance do I have? It shows how much luck is involved, or bad luck, I should say, in some of these circumstances, because people like Dell would have been doing the right thing in the right place, acting correctly, not cutting corners, right? And there's just this piece of chance that none of us have any control over. And I guess, just speaking personally, I always before you enter the military, it's always just, well, I won't do the dumb thing and I'll be fine, right? And then I'll come home. But that's really not how
No.
it works.
No, a couple things. So,
Yeah, it's
sorry. Browse very quickly. You can do the right thing. And wrong place, wrong time. And a lot of it is just luck, right? Am I sitting in the bunker or am I running to my next position? Am I staying in this defensive position or running my next position? Am I, exposed? Like, yeah, it's just Dell got hit in the neck. Calling for air support. And I'm sorry, for his father and Katie if they see his podcast, but there's a video on YouTube I stumbled upon, I don't know, fucking 6-7 years ago. And it doesn't say anything about Dimitri, but it talks about 25th ID as combat cameraman. And you hear these guys going, LT is hit, and they're in defilade. And they were doing a movement of contact, and they obviously made contact, and as unnamed individual, because I'm not going to put his name out there unless he wants to, but the pilot was like, hey, Dell, die with his, the microphone in his hand, calling for air support. All right. It's trying to support his guys. Go back to these guys that were processing, like everyone's got their own timeline, their own reasons. And I think it's, I would hope that, for those on this call and those that listen to this is like, hey, it's okay. Everyone's gonna process things differently. Just know whenever it hits you, like, it's okay, man. Take that time, take it for yourself, him or herself, and make sure you actually give into that and just let it flow. Because you need that. Like, your body needs that, your mind needs that, your soul needs that. And because it's tough. But we've been through experiences that collectively here in this call that I would argue probably wouldn't give back and wouldn't change a thing, because they're formative experiences that made us, the men we are today. And obviously we all want Dell back and things to be different. But I know Dell and even Miss Del Castillo would not want everything up to that final bullet, probably striking the ground and eventually getting to his neck, to be changed, right up until that last moment, because you're testing yourself, testing your mettle, and doing what you were made to do, born to do, graduated to do. So because if not me, then who? And then we all ask ourselves that at respective points in life. And you can only hope that you made a positive impact to those individuals, that when you asked that question and you answered that call, that you were able to make a positive impact on others. And I know, at least because I've ran into dudes at Bragg here, who were under Dell's command, like, hey, because they saw me, I wear a Team Dell t-shirt every once in a while when I do my workouts, to still have that t-shirt. And I have two of them actually. They're like, yeah, as far back as a couple years ago, like, Del Castillo. I was like, yeah, he was my platoon leader. And I got an E6 saying that, and he was an E3 or E2 saying that when Del was PO. I was like, that dude's the best officer I met. So that's all we can, I think, ask for in his life, is to take, be good husbands, fathers, brothers, etc. But like, make an impact on others. And I know when I, did my semi-annual engagement with Dell's dad, Mr. Del Castillo, I was like, hey, your son's not forgotten. He made an impact on others. In the grand scheme of everything going on in this world, like, that's all we can ask for, is to make an impact, and a lasting impact that carries on beyond the time we, our bones go into the earth. So
we're coming up on 2 hours here, guys, and I want to thank all of you all. We'll leave some time here in case anybody else has anything else, but you all have made an impact. So there's people who hear this who have never heard Dimitri Del Castillo's name, and somebody will look him up, read more about his story, maybe read about Katie. Might be somebody that goes to West Point now because they heard how fun rugby is and finding bars all by themselves with no girls at them. But there are also a lot of people that have dealt with loss that have or haven't handled it yet. And you guys walked through some pretty deep stuff there on how you did. And I think that's going to reach a lot of people and make, again, a really big impact. So thank you all very much for taking the time to talk about Del and remember him. But before we close it up here, we'll just go around one time if anybody's got anything else. Andy? Or you know what? No order. Just leave it open here.
I'll jump in. I just want to say thanks, Preston, for putting this together. I know for me and really for this group, we stay in contact, we talk, but this has really been a great opportunity for us to open up and have this conversation. And it's a difficult conversation to have, but obviously it's something that's been very fruitful for all of us to just put it out there and talk our way through it. So I'm very appreciative of that. Del's a great dude. His memory lives on. And I think all of us are better just for knowing him. So really thanks for putting this all together.
Yeah, I mean, at our 10-year reunions is something we all got together, but we didn't talk about Del at all because it's not something that you necessarily want to talk through in a reunion setting. But yeah, kind of speaking to people that could be listening, I encourage others to do the same. If you're struggling with something and you served, and there's probably others that might be going through some mental stuff too, so reach out.
I'll just piggyback on that. This has been super cathartic, which I kind of knew it was going to be. So I'm glad, absolutely glad and privileged to have been a part of it. But if whoever does listen to this, and to piggyback on what everybody's been saying, and to highlight Mike's point, you don't know when it's going to hit you, and you don't know if it's going to hit you more than one time and how often it's going to do it. Because I could probably say the same thing for Memorial Day or like 4th of July, stuff like that. There's just a flood of emotions come back. So absolutely embrace that. Veteran suicide's a real thing, and it's super sad why it happens so often, and that it does happen so often. So I would just encourage people, if you have the opportunity, get with a group and just talk. Make it a purpose-driven talk, not if that's something you want to work through, then work through it. Even something like this, it's just been super helpful. So I hope other people can find that and use that as something to benefit from.
Yeah,
Preston, I got one. Hey, I'm sorry, man. Oh, sorry, Jericho. Man, I just screwed that up. I got something covering half the screen. Go ahead, brother.
How'd you say? Well, I was gonna say we just hit on it, towards the end of this on processing and doing it, and I think I want to translate the message that it's okay, right? Like people in the GWAT time, like people who, I don't know, I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, like, you've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I guess I would want to translate the other message of it's okay to do it how you need to do it, right? Like every one of us on this call is different. Every person listening to this is different, but take your time and process anything that you need to, right? Like we're talking about a pretty heavy subject of, life and death, but there's a lot of impacts from serving. There's a lot of impacts from just life, right? So when you're going through something, I think we'd hit on it. We just did at the end, to have an impact, but, take your time, do what you need to, reach out. There's always somebody there, right? Like don't feel alone, but memorialize it in your own way. And I just, I think a lot of how I processed it, we covered it a little bit earlier, and we talked about a cross on a hill with dog tags, right? And, there's also graves, right? There's a lot of things in life that are actual things that memorialize something else. And I think a lot of the growth and maybe kind of the enlightenment that I had was, climbing a crazy hill that's really like a rugby thing. Like it's not safe for the record, right? To make a little light of it, like you're like climbing up a vertical face and like rocks are falling down, there's gravel,
I
but
love you, bro.
you get up to the top of something that is difficult, right? And that you're going through, and you know, whether it's climbing a mountain, whether it's doing something you've never done before, you get somewhere and you feel a sense of accomplishment. And no matter what you do, you take time to reflect, right? And I think that's what the cross means to the Army Rugby Brotherhood. I think that's, you know, a symbol of processing, of taking a moment to be thankful for what you have, but also to remember somebody. And how I remember Dell, it might be weird, I don't know what it is, it's my way. I don't I remember the actions that Dell did when I knew him, and I remember the person he was, and I remember the impact that we just hit on right now, where, you know, there's a CrossFit workout of the day for Dell, right? Like there's an impact of what you can do with your life to impact somebody else, and there's a way you can memorialize it and think about what you do next. And I think that's there's been times in my life where I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of crazy, but maybe it's that glimmer of memory that gets connected, and it's like, yeah, but I need to do better for myself so that I can have an impact for other people, because Dell would have done that, right? Or he had that impact. And that's how you continue to grow an impact from somebody who's done a lot for you, is to pay it forward and do the right thing, right? So get above yourself, you know, strive for greatness and remember the good times, right? And know that it's okay to process heavy things like what we talked about on this call. So you're not alone. Pick up the phone. There's a lot of resources out there. I mean, everybody's okay, right? You know, walk your own path, but keep getting better every day, because that's what Dell would want, and that's what we on this call would want you to do, right? Just keep striving, one foot in front of the other, right?
Hey, dude. First of all, I love you. I'm sorry for stepping on you, because I'm pulling up something that Tom Corral read some cadets. So just coincidentally, obviously this was way before Preston put this thing together for us, which I think we all agree that is awesome, cathartic, and I think I can't wait to tell Mr. Del Castillo to listen to. So that's the only reason I got some words I'm actually reading, but because this is Del and Darren, this is my closing paragraph to Tom to read some cadets, and I'm just saying this because I think it encapsulates everything we said tonight. But common threads woven throughout the remembrances of the fallen, stories of exemplary character and innate characteristics so rare that only a few exhibited them consistently, is recognizably tragic. However sad the situation, let these remembrances serve their purpose appropriately, to celebrate, not mourn, the lives of the fallen. Darren and Dell, like so many of the fallen alumni, lived for others and served the nation and their soldiers without regret, without abandon, and with the utmost sincerity in all that they did. Their sacrifices deserve recognition and remembrance, and for that, I'm grateful for them, and I'm just glad that I'm a friend of both of them and a friend of Dell. So credit to the last part for Darren's brother Miles. Definitely had a piece of play, but yeah, man, I'm just glad to be on this call. Thank you, Preston. Thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely,
And
guys.
not just for Dell, but for every guy you talk about. For that family, they have something, some rest of their lives, man. Because I listened to Todd's earlier, and what you're doing is awesome. So thank you from Mike. And I know the other guys, you know, appreciate it, but I know Katie will appreciate it. I know Mr. Mrs. Del Castillo will appreciate it when they hear about it. And it's just awesome, man. So thank you for doing what you do. So
Absolutely, gents. It's the absolute least we can do, right? So thank you all very much for doing this again, and hope to talk soon, gents. We'll see you.
Have a good one.